describe it as it's a coming-of-age love story between a young boy and two young girls, young women, and it's set in an interesting time in Seattle where there was, you know, a very vibrant red light district, but there's also this the suffrage movement. So there's this confluence of these two social pressures that they're swept up in. But the main character, how he comes about, he has a unique backstory in that it's based on an actual boy who was raffled off at the 1909 World's Fair in Seattle, which is so crazy. It was one of those things that when I learned about what had gone on at the fair, and I was doing all this research, this mention of this boy kept popping up, especially when I stumbled across an article in the Seattle Times that said somebody will draw a baby as a prize. And I just wanted to know more about this kid. I couldn't find anything out about him aside from his name and where he came from, as far as the orphanage that had donated him. And so I just used his life as a blank canvas to tell a new story. His name was Ernest. He was donated by the Washington Children's Receiving Home, and that's all we know. There's these articles with the man who's the director of the Children's Receiving Home talking about, we're giving away this boy and this child, someone will draw him as a prize, and that's really all we know, which is fascinating and a little maddening because I want to know more. I started with a character that's obviously, there's this touchstone moment in history, a boy who was raffled off at the 1909 World's Fair. But what were the circumstances of his life that led this child to this spot where this is going to take place? And so in my imagination, I jump back a few years and I have him as the son of a Chinese woman and a Caucasian missionary in China, and he is sent on a ship with all these other orphans, boys and girls, who were basically sold into servitude in the West, which was shockingly common. Even after there was a restriction on immigration, they still kind of were smuggled in from Canada. And so I have that backstory for this character. And so that sort of removes his family, and he enters into this world where he's working in the red light district, and he befriends these two girls, and they sort of become his family. And then it's this weird coming-of-age love story. It's very innocent, yet it's set in this world where everything and everybody is for sale.
You talk about the research that you've done and all the research you go, because both this story as well as Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, inspired by true characters, also set in Seattle and in history there. Why is that a time frame and an area that you're passionate about telling? Yeah,
I do believe, I think writers write about what they lament. We write about what we miss, and I miss Seattle. So I've been in Montana almost 20 years, but I write about Seattle. And it was interesting when I first met Ivan Doig, who passed away last year, he's from here, but he spent the last 40 years in Seattle writing about Montana. And so you see that a lot. We just sort of go back to the well of all of our strongest memories and sort of generate stories from that.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope readers take away from reading Love and Other Consolation Prizes?
Yeah, I tend to say that I'm in the compassion creation business. I want readers to feel something. I want their hearts enlarged a little bit. Sometimes you almost have to break their hearts a little bit and then put the pieces back together again, hopefully in better working condition. And so it is an emotional story. It's a mother and son story. It's a love story. It's the story of an elderly man caring for his ailing wife and trying to keep the secrets of his past and her past from their grown-up daughters. And so it's a family story as well, but there's a lot of emotional equity all over the place. And so I hope people feel that. It's historical fiction, so there's definitely some historical details and some things to learn along the way, some perhaps educational components, but really I hope they partake of the emotional currency that's spent in the book.
I saw this last week that George Takei has signed on to be an executive producer.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Uncle
Tell me
George.
about this whole process of adapting Hotel on the Bitter and Sweet.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because the big news about the film came out last week, but this has been a deal that's been in the works for more than a year. And so I initially met with a woman named Diane Kwan. She's a producer, met her in Chicago. And we talked about her optioning the book. She had a certain a take on the story, and she was very passionate about it. She brought on a producing partner, and then in July we went to New York and had lunch with George Takei, and she got him on board as an exec producer and turned me loose on a screenplay. I've been working with various people on that. It's been a total process. You know, for me, I work in isolation on my own book, and films are collaborative, and so there's going to be a lot of other people involved, which is really cool because it sort of allows me to learn vicariously this whole new industry. And I would love to write for film again. I would love to, you know, do more of it in the future. I think it's, you know, it's super interesting work, and just another type of storytelling.